My name is Katie Dillard. I'm the Director of Curatorial Affairs at the Albany Museum of Art. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker this evening. Many of you may already know him or are familiar with him, and if you don't yet, you will. Russ
Is
first.
that good or bad?
That's a good thing.
Okay, you said it like it was sort of bad.
No, it's funny.
Okay.
Russ first reached out to me a few years ago knowing that the AMA had some valuable Menaboni murals in our collection. And I think he just wanted to make sure that they were still here, but I'm glad that you did. Okay. And I'm glad that we established connection. It has been lovely to know you and to get to know you through this process. Mr. Clayton keeps a steadfast watch over nearly every artwork and mural that remains of Mr. Menaboni's career, and is a guardian and purveyor of Athos Menaboni's legacy. We are lucky to have this collector of stories back with us this evening. Russ Clayton is a retired educator who spent 37 years teaching social studies in the Cobb County School District. He holds 4 degrees, including advanced degrees in social studies education from Georgia State University. I will try to speak louder. Beyond education, Clayton has long been a passionate collector with interests ranging from Coca-Cola memorabilia to U.S. presidential history. Through a lighthearted exchange of letters with Coca-Cola's then president, Robert W. Woodruff, it led to a friendship with the artist Menaboni. This connection sparked his deep commitment to preserving and promoting the artist's legacy. He has curated at least 6 major exhibitions and processed archival collections devoted to Menaboni, and donated an extensive collection of works to Kennesaw State University. His connection with the Woodruff Foundation was critical to the success of establishing a gallery dedicated to honoring the life and the work of Athos Menaboni at the Albany Museum of Art, in a gallery which I believe was named for you, which is a monumental achievement right there. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And lastly, during the 2014-2015 landmark exhibition, Athos Menaboni, 6 Decades of Painting in Georgia, here in the Haley Gallery, Mr. Clayton was an invaluable resource to the AMA and was a guest curator there. So thank you so much for helping us to pull that successful exhibition off. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Russ Clayton.
Thank you. The only thing I'd like to tell you as we go through is if a question comes to mind, and I am getting this way more and more as I get older, when I have a question, I have to blurt it out right then or I lose it. So if you have a question or something comes to mind while we're going through, I hope you'll let me know. But one of the things that I'd like to start out with is just, and it's sort of a dumb question here because, you know, Albany is such a Menaboni place, but I'm assuming that most of you have heard of Athos Menaboni, but I would probably guess that most of you are mainly familiar with his bird, mainly just as a bird artist. So I told Katie if it was okay with her, I'd like to sort of do, to look at his whole career. And I think some of the things will surprise you that he did before he ever became a bird painter. But as Katie already mentioned, I found Mr. Menaboni because of my greatest hero, who was Robert Woodruff. And of course, Mr. Woodruff, we're going to talk about him a little bit more in just a minute. So I'll save that. But I was at Rich's. There was a department store named Rich's. I don't know if there was one in Albany or not. Seems like there could have been one in Macon. I'm not sure. But anyway, very prominent department store. And I saw Menaboni's birds. And I thought to myself, I know that name, but how? And then I opened it up, and it was filled with art that was owned by Mr. Woodruff. And then I realized that the connection to the Christmas cards, because the first edition, most of the plates in the book were destroyed in a plane crash. So when it was reprinted, they had to seek new art. And so I thought, do I really want this book? And then I had to have it because of its connection to Mr. Woodruff. And then I found out that Mr. Menaboni was still living. I'm really embarrassed to tell you this, but I didn't even notice that his wife wrote the book. She was the author, and they used Mr. Menaboni's art. And so I later had an opportunity to take my book, and fortunately, when I asked Mr. Menaboni if I could mail him my book for him to sign, his answer was no. You can't mail it. And his next words were, my wife has a broken leg and she's in the hospital, and you call back in 2 to 3 weeks because we'd like for you to come and visit. And so that's how our relationship began. So one of the things I'm really thrilled that Katie did is Athos was born in 1895, and next month on the 20th we're celebrating his 130th birthday. And he was born in the port city in Italy named Livorno. And just in case you don't have that in your mind, when he was a child he could ride his bike to Pisa. So it's on the West Coast. His father was a ship chandler, which means they were suppliers to ships, because it was one of the most important ports in Europe and one of the most important really in the world. And ships from all over especially the continent of Europe would come through Livorno, and if they had any kind of issue or they needed food, or back then at this time, some of the boats still had sails, so the wind may have torn the sails and they needed to be repaired. So they did all of that, and the business is still there and still called Menaboni, and it's the longest continually operating business in Italy today, is this same business. So I'm going to look over every now and then, just in case when I was studying, I thought, now I can't forget this, and I'm afraid I'll forget if I don't look. But he had no interest in his father's business. And so his father recognized a talent and had him study with a sculptor, a muralist, as well as a marine painter. So to me, Athos is, when he paints water, in my opinion, no one can do a better job. And some of his seascapes, to me, are the most beautiful I've ever seen. And so he was devastated during the war, World War I. He was in school at the Academy of Fine Arts. It's the same school Galileo went to. So it was very old school. But he didn't finish because of World War I. And I think you'd be interested in knowing that he was a pilot, one of the first pilots back when they called, flaming coffin, they were just sitting on top of a gas can. And so that was very traumatic for him. And when he decided to come here, his father had a friend and allowed Athos to go on the freighter, the American freighter. And so he worked his way over, and they stopped along several places in Africa, Madeira Islands, and then he landed in Norfolk, and then went to New York, where he stayed for about 2 years. He didn't particularly like New York City, mainly for the same reason some people don't like it today. It's a lot of people. And he was still struggling with the language, so he was not very comfortable. And so he had an opportunity to go to Florida. And so there was a new real estate development around the mid-20s, and it's called Davis Islands. And it's still in Tampa today. And there are 3 islands, but somehow they've connected 2, so now they just say they're 2 islands, but they were originally 3, all man-made. and they built apartments, and Athos's job was the art director. So if you notice at the very bottom center, you'll see his name. And so all this design work on the sides, he did that for the ads that appeared in the papers. And then he also did the frontal designs of this building, which is based on a palace in Florence, and it's still an apartment building in Tampa today. So we wouldn't call him an architect. So he, but like I said, he just did the frontal views around, not necessarily the inside. Now, one of the things that I wanted to show you, there's a temple. It's still there. Unfortunately, it's been saved, but it's not where it needs to be. But the building is in Macon, and he was commissioned to do this Egyptian-themed mosque for the Shriners Temple. And so Egypt was sort of the rave at this time, and it's also a theme for the Shriners. But it was a rave because about this time period, a few years earlier, they had discovered King Tut's tomb. So everyone was so interested in everything Egyptian. And are y'all familiar with Haverty's Furniture? There's the man was J.J. Haverty, and he was a great patron of Athos, one of the early patrons. And this is the Rhodes Haverty building. And what Mr. Menaboni did here very early was it's called a Renaissance Florentine ceiling, and which is still there and saved. And then another thing that he did for Mr. Haverty, you may have heard of St. Joseph's Hospital in Atlanta, which is now part of Emory. And their chapel had 2 archangels on each side. And I'm happy to tell you that both of these have been saved, and one remains in the hospital lobby, and the other is in Dublin, Ireland. So when Athos, he came to Atlanta because, as I mentioned earlier, that real estate job, but the land boom ended, and most people in Florida went bankrupt. And so he went to Fort Myers for a very short period of time, but he had an opportunity to go to Atlanta because of a very prominent architect named Philip Schuetze. And you may realize that there's a Schuetze home here in Albany. I don't know the address or where it is, but Jim, do you know the address? Or
It's the Lanier home.
Yes, the Lanier home. And so so he came here to Atlanta, and he was here 1 month, and he met Sarah Arnold. And they met because Athos was staying in her uncle's boarding house, and Sarah was here. She took the train from Rome to date. She had a date on Friday night with one man and another date with a different man on Saturday, and in between she met Athos. And I wanted to tell you this about his mother. She was a very devout Catholic, and when you can imagine the difficulty when a son would move so far away from home. But her greatest prayer was that Athos never marry an American woman. And the reason for that is because they smoked cigarettes, and they also went out without chaperones. And so word came back to his mom that Athos was marrying a girl from Rome. And they say she literally dropped to her knees. And but they said, "Mother, it's not Rome, Italy, it's Rome, Georgia." And she said, "It doesn't matter, it's still Rome." And so when they went there, they went to Italy for their honeymoon. And it really was love at first sight. And his mom and 2 sisters eventually came to Atlanta to live near them. At first with them, but then later near them after World War II. What's that?
What was the Shudsey connection?
That's the architect that what he did, and I'm going to show you some slides. Mr. Shudsey did not just private homes, private residencies, but he also did several, like the temple, the Jewish synagogue on Peachtree.
But he worked for him? Or something?
He did. He hired him to do mural work. And so so he was painting murals. Like I said, the Egyptian temple that I showed you, and then I'm going to show you in just a second some that he did for C&S Bank in Macon. But in between, he would do landscapes like this, and just to sell to try to make money. And then this is the bank building that's in Macon, C&S, much earlier than all the C&S work that we're familiar with now, 2 of which are upstairs. But there were 5 murals there, all centered around state and local Macon history, like the history of Wesleyan College, the history of Mercer University. And this is James Oglethorpe. This is one of the murals. And so there are 2 now at Wesleyan College, and there are 3 at Mercer. Now to Mr. Shudsey. I wanted to mention the Swan House because that's probably the one that you may be familiar with the most. It's now part of the complex at the Atlanta History Center. So I assume that some of you might have been there, so I didn't put any slides in of that home. But that was the first big project that he did in 1927 with Mr. Shudsey. It took about a year. And the interesting thing that I did want to tell you, which Mr. Menaboni could tell it much better than I'm going to tell it, but Mrs. Inman was very set on how she wanted everything, which, that's okay, and if you have the money to do it. And they imported the finest pink marble for her master bathroom. And after it was all installed, she didn't like it. And she hired Mr. Menaboni to come and faux paint the marble green. And he said, "Russ, that's the craziest job I've ever been asked to do, but I did it with pleasure because I needed the money." And fortunately, it's still there. Now, this is another Shudsey home, the May Patterson Goodrum home. It's a house museum. And he painted the breakfast room, all the shelving, over the shelving, and also the ceiling. And so this is just a close-up, and this is about 1931. Now, this is a different architect, and unfortunately, as far as I know, this is one of the very few murals that we no longer have, because this is called Glen Ridge Hall. And Thomas Glenn, who he was a good friend with Mr. Woodruff's father. This building was destroyed, this home was destroyed to build the Mercedes-Benz headquarters, which is now in Sandy Springs. But he also painted murals in this breakfast room. Now, this is another Shudsey project where the home was built around 1919, 1920, but the owners wanted an addition. And so the addition had this entry, and they chose an Asian theme. So these are some of the figures that he painted in this area. And the most unusual is on Sapelo Island. And it's the home of R.J. Reynolds, which now belongs to the state of Georgia. And the home contains 3 areas of murals. The banquet hall, or the circus room. And this room is filled with snakes, and you see the lion and the cats, and there's an elephant, flying trapeze, everything that you can think of connected to a circus. And then my personal favorite is the sunroom, which was right beside the indoor pool, where they had banana trees and things like that. Another Schuetze home, there was a very prominent person. The last name is Patterson, and you may have heard of Patterson Funeral Home in Atlanta. And this is a magnificent home, but the foyer, I think you might even call it a hall. The hall went the entire length of the home, from the front door all the way back and turned to the side door, and all in that area he painted a dogwood forest with a few birds, and then that also included going up the staircase. Another, this is a different architect, but murals. These are all associated with Italy. His name is Albert Howell. You may have heard of Howell Mill Road. Mr. Howell, the Howell Mill was during the Civil War, so this may have been a grandson of one of those people, but Clark Howell, he owned the Atlanta newspaper. And so that's a up-close view of one of the areas in Italy. Now I wanted to show you this example of an illustration, and this one is really magnificent in person, because I wish you could see the detail on his belt, and you know, the little eyeglass you see in his pocket, the bullets along his the belt around his waist, the eyes. But I've seen a cowboy, I've seen a sailor, I've seen several different examples, and I think he did those. My guess is he was submitting work for a possible magazine article, or maybe to illustrate books. Maybe he sent some to publishers. There's no evidence that any of these were published. And then, of course, he never forgot his home in Italy, and he always enjoyed painting things associated with his home country. And this boat is called a beccolino. And what the beccolino would do is go from Livorno to Pisa to Florence and carry goods in man-made canals. And so that's a way to get things from the port to the inner area of the country. Then during President Roosevelt's time, they had the WPA, and so there were a lot of artists who did various murals for post offices or libraries, and the shape is because this could have been over a doorway or over a transom, so that's why you see it look like, you know, you would paint it over a mural, and it's called Mother Earth bestowing gifts on Chattanooga. And we know it's Chattanooga because we can see Lookout Mountain in the background. I think I have one more. Yeah, there's one more. This says University of Georgia, but I've never found any evidence that it was ever painted there. And we don't really know that he ever painted any WP. He did a school mural in Atlanta. It's called the English Avenue School, and he painted a small mural in the library, but not any of the mural studies that we have in the archives. So he was in a lull in between murals, and one of the things he wanted to do was study paint color, because back then, you know, you just couldn't squirt paint out of a tube. So he would have to mix the color. And one of the hardest colors, he said, was cardinal red. Because, you know, we've heard of fire engine red or Georgia bulldog red, cardinal red. And so he decided to paint a cardinal. And this is not the first painting. This is just an example of one of his cardinal paintings. But one of their friends came in who was an interior decorator, and she insisted on buying this for a client. And so one person saw the painting, and so then someone else wanted one, someone else wanted another. So that's how his painting career began, and how he became famous for painting birds. But in between time, he still found time to go back and do some other projects, like the murals that are upstairs, which we'll get to in just a minute. So this is an example of bluebirds. It's unusual because normally there's a pair, but this has two pair, and it's quite large. And the foliage is apple blossoms. Now their home was in Atlanta, and Lynn, and by the way, I'm so grateful to Jim and Lynn Horn. You know who they are. They put me up for the night, and I sure do appreciate it. And Lynn was telling me about visiting Athos when she was young. And they had 6 acres out in what they now would say is Sandy Springs. Their stationery says Dunwoody, but anyway, they built an aviary and eventually built a home there where they lived for many years. And Athos, he was inspired by St. Francis. And so on the outside of the front wall, he built this dedication where is fired clay of St. Francis, where he had that just to the left of his front door. Now, another big Schutzey project was the Capital City Club downtown. And so in the middle of the 3rd floor, they wanted to build, like they call it, a New York style supper club. I really don't know what that means. It's just what I read. And but there were no windows. And so one of the ways that Mr. Schutzey thought may help the room was to put in mirrors. And he asked Athos to create the mirrors. And they're so unique because he had to paint in reverse, backwards. And so we asked him, did you use a mirror? And he couldn't because it made him sick. He got nauseated when he would try to use a mirror, and he'd go it'd be blurry and that kind of thing. So he literally had to go back and forth, and you paint the larger items first and then work your way down to the small, the detail. And there are 15 mirrors, and fortunately they've all been saved. And this one is when they allowed one to be borrowed to go to Kennesaw State University. Now to Mr. Woodruff, who we're so blessed that the Woodruff Foundation lent the 12 Christmas cards, which are upstairs from the Jones Center. But Mr. Woodruff by far was Mr. Menaboni's greatest patron. And it started because we have no evidence, even though Mr. Woodruff was in the social circle of all of these people who had these murals in their homes. But we don't have any idea that Mr. Menaboni knew Mr. Woodruff. He may have known who painted them, but we don't know. But one of the first exhibitions was at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And then there was one at Kennedy Galleries. And there was doves and longleaf pine was on, and it's quite a large painting. And you can see what it looked like because it's the very first Christmas card. So a group of people thought, that reminds us of Itchaway, and we'd like to impress the boss, so we think we'll buy this for him. And he was so happy and pleased that his wife decided to put it on a Christmas card. And before, they always had a unique Christmas card. It might be the front gate on the main road at Itchaway. There were people making sorghum syrup. There was another one of the fireplace in the big house on the property. But she thought this will be this will be a nice thing. Let's make these. And I brought a Christmas card, even though there's some upstairs. You see they're quite large, but they're really beautiful. And so when he had them printed, you can see it was quite an ordeal. So I thought you'd like to see what they actually look like. but they were so popular, Mrs. Woodruff said, let's do another one. And so they did. Well, it became such an anticipated event that it continued for 44 cards for 43 years. And when you see all of them together, it's really a wow moment. And I have some articles where the Smithsonian says that's their very best Christmas card collection. Not the president's or no White House Christmas card, but this series. And everyone, I remember someone that I interviewed. When the card would come, he would put it on the entry table. So when all of his guests came in, they would know he was on Mr. Woodruff's Christmas card list. And so people began to keep them and frame them. And I wish I could say the exact quote, but it was a very deep secret. No one knew except Mr. Woodruff. But a story, because I think you're interested in Mr. Woodruff. I wanted to tell you, I think you're going to be surprised. He was deeply involved with every aspect of every card, except maybe the last few, when he was very old, and Mr. Jones took care of it. But this one, 1948, and the lithograph's upstairs. I have a letter in the archives where Mr. Woodruff wrote to Mr. Menaboni, I've never seen a bird nest in a Cherokee rose. Are you right? I mean, this isn't the exact quote, but it's close. And I thought Cherokee roses were pink, not white. And so Mr. Menaboni wrote back, and I found the letter at Emory, the response. So I put that with the original. The original letter came to Mr. Menaboni, and he verified that the painting was accurate, and of course Mr. Woodruff approved it. But the other thing that I remember that Athos told me, that it was quite an ordeal. Usually around March, Mr. Jones would call Athos and say, they called him the gentleman. The gentleman would like to see you tomorrow. And of course, it doesn't matter if you had a doctor's appointment or whatever else, you went down to see Mr. Woodruff. And he knew that it was going to take all day to get this done, because he would go in and Mr. Woodruff would say, they had a deep respect for each other, but I don't think you would call it a friendship, because they were not in the same social circle. But there was Mr. Woodruff used his art for years and years and years. But he would ask Mr. Menaboni, he would say, well, have you thought about a bird this year? And Athos would say, I have. What about a wood duck? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's a good idea. Let's think about this. So then, the phone would ring all day. The president might call. The governor would call. Secretaries coming in and out. They'd have lunch. And then about 5 o'clock, Mr. Woodruff would go, I have it. We'll do a wood duck. And so I said all that to say, I mean it with affection, but it needed to be his idea. And I have another letter where they were going to do a Baltimore Oriole. And Mr. Woodruff wanted Spanish moss in it. And Athos said, I don't think that's a good idea, to Mr. Jones. And so Mr. Jones called Mr. Menaboni back and said, Mr. Woodruff wants Spanish moss. And so he put a few sprigs. It's not upstairs, unfortunately, but it's the 1977 card. So here's the famous wood duck. And this is I believe this one is upstairs. It's the last one. Now this is one of my favorites. This hangs over the mantle at Mr. Woodruff's house at Itchaway, where he overheard a group of men talking about the flight speed of birds. Which one is the slowest? And they were arguing, I think it's this one, blah, blah. And so he commissioned Athos to do the research and then paint this painting. And if you remember, the Woodruff Foundation was gracious enough to let me borrow that painting to bring here in 2014. And it stayed for a few months, but it had to go back because the house was going to be used. But I can't identify all the birds. The most interesting is number 3 of the fastest is a wild turkey. And if you've ever seen a turkey fly, they do zip across pretty quickly. And the number 1 is the duck called a canvasback. But I think you can see a Canada goose, but it's a very large painting and quite beautiful. This is the one project he did for Coca-Cola. A lot of people didn't realize it was his work, but he painted the sports, the balls and the birds, and then the Coke bottle and what I call a bullseye. That was added by marketing, PR. And it's very rare. I only know of one. And it's at the Coca-Cola Company. And I've tried my best to find one for my collection, but I haven't been successful. Now, one of the neatest things to me is, because of my love for Coca-Cola and my love for Athos, this is the only calendar that has any of Menaboni's birds. So it's Coca-Cola, Menaboni, and it's the year I was born. And so I've always thought that was not an accident. And I brought one if anybody would like to see one. In the early 40s, the National Audubon Society and some other companies wanted to do some lithographs, and so they began to sell a few lithographs of his works. One of the real famous companies in Atlanta was called Montag, and some of you may remember when we were in school, we had something called a Blue Horse notebook or Blue Horse paper. That was made by Montag, and they even had they had a beautiful store in New York. But if you bought a box of stationery, you were given this small print. It came on the box, and so that was a way to get some items. This is a magazine, Time. I believe the date, the date is 1950. Where the green dot is, someone had nominated Athos to be Man of the Year in 1950. Now, another great patron was Richard Rich, who was the head of the Rich's department store. And they had originally 3 paintings. This is one. A lot of times it's really strange. I like the foliage as much or more than I do the bird. And I love blackberries, and it brings back a childhood memory. But Mr. Rich had these printed on the covers of the menus that were used in the Magnolia Room. And this is another example that were done nearly 10 years later. They appeared in a poetry book, and then Mr. Rich used it on a menu cover. Now, to what we have upstairs. There was a bank president named Mills Lane. Does that ring a bell with anybody? Have you heard of Mills B. Lane? He was longtime president of C&S Bank, and he came up with the idea for Athos to do these murals, and Athos was thrilled because it got him out of the house and gave him something different to do. And this is a large mural that he did for the Mitchell Street branch, which fortunately was removed and stretched, and now it's at Clayton State University in Morrow. This is when it was exhibited at Kennesaw State, but it's now permanently this is the installation where it is now. And the conservator decided to keep these two. The white is where a door was. So the mural went around, the door went around the mural, and the small white box is where the exit sign was. So she just decided not to try to fill it in, and left it as is. Now, one of the more famous projects that he did for CNS was the eggshell mosaic. It's 3,200 eggshells, and this was in the Decatur branch. And I'm sorry about the lighting. It's up high with lights shining down, so it's very difficult to photograph. But the theme is from the Bible verse, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And so I have a printout of what that looks like if you would like to see it. Another magnificent mural that's connected to Mr. Lane. The school is today called the Fraser Center, but back then it was the Cerebral Palsy School. He had a daughter that had cerebral palsy. And when Mr. Menaboni's mother died, he created this mural out of Murano glass. And so I was reading some quotes, and they said, well, what kind of bird, what bird is that, or what fish? He said, it's just a bird and a fish. You know, he just made it up to fill it in. But it's really quite beautiful, and it's now in their all-purpose room in Decatur. Now, I wanted you to see this. This is sort of unusual, but Sarah had an idea to write a story called Pedro. And there was a real summer tanager that came to their friend's home in Atlanta. At least 5, but I think maybe 6 years in a row, the same bird. And we have, made in 1937, we have the film, homemade movies of the bird, 1937, where it would land, it would land on your hand, or you could be on it at a table outside and roll a marble, and it would push the marble back to you. And it loved to eat pound cake. But Sarah decided to write an imaginary story about the life, gave the bird human qualities, and what would it be like to migrate from Mexico to Atlanta and back. And the story was never published. I felt bad because the publishers, we have all the letters, the publishers praised the artwork. But they said it's a little bit complicated for kids in general. It's complicated for kids and a little bit boring for adults. And but we do have the manuscript. They suggested some changes, but Sarah refused. That's just how Sarah was. This is my book, and I don't like what you want me to do. So, but some are very dramatic. I wish I had put one in. It's a pair, male and female, and the female has died from water pollution. And so there's water pollution all around, and the mate is grieving because of the death. So she tried to bring in various issues at that time, in which water pollution and air pollution is part of it. Now, I wanted you to see an example, not necessarily of the bird, but of the wood. And he made a trip to Japan, and he noticed this wood. It's called Nakora, Nakora. And it came from the Philippines, but it was processed in Japan into plywood. And what people would do is panel a den or panel their library. And so he thought, this will be really beautiful in my studio. And so at some point he began to see things because he was so creative. And he would see ripples in the water, or it might illustrate maybe farmland. And sometimes it was just strictly decorative. Or sometimes he didn't see anything and he just he gessoed the wood and then just used that as what to paint on. But I don't know, I sort of look at it and see water and waves and maybe sand dunes up at the top, but I guess you could just interpret it anyway. A really interesting one is of a Japanese koi, where it's like working its way in the water, and then the knot in the wood, that's where the fish touched to make a ripple in the top. So it was very creative what he would do. Then he painted various types of either flowers or other types of foliage. This is a chestnut, purple gallinule, mourning doves. These are chickadees. And I chose this one because I think it's beautiful, number one, night heron, but also it's one of the few that we have on the easel that his painting, and then we can see the finished work. He wanted this is another Mr. Woodruff story. He painted this in 1975 because 1976 was the bicentennial. And he just knew Mr. Woodruff would buy this for the Christmas card. But Mr. Woodruff refused because he never allowed a bird of prey on a Christmas card. He didn't think that was appropriate. And if I had to guess, I would say the red-tailed hawk was probably his favorite bird, and he had several paintings of a red-tailed hawk, but he never allowed it to be on a card. But this was eventually sold to an army general, and lithographs were made of it. This is my personal favorite painting. You might find it unusual, but if you asked me to line 15 paintings up, we might get to number 8 or 9 before we got to a bird. I know that's crazy, but that's just my own love for his work. And here you can see the examples of the water. And the tower is called the Tower of Marzocco, and it's at the entry of the harbor in Livorno. This, I don't know what he was thinking, but I wanted just you to see it. He was obviously had nothing to do for a couple of days, and it reminds some people of Dr. Seuss, but some people think it's Satan. And, there's all but it's titled Anguish. It's called Anguish. And I don't really know how he felt that day, but it was not a good day, I don't think. But it's still a stunning work. And so I'll close with Sarah and Athos. They had such a wonderful marriage. She would read to him while he painted, or she would go out in the car and get the magnolia limb or the pine limb or whatever he might need. She would read the paper, and she always protected his time. He only had visitors at a certain time of the day. The rest was reserved to paint, and when the light was best in the studio, that kind of thing. And she was his main supporter and agent. So what I wanted to do is just show you a couple of things that I brought and then see if you have any questions. You might not realize, now this is an old copy, but World Book Encyclopedia, and I just checked this a week ago in the library. So even the 2025 edition, they still have Mr. Menaboni's birds, and it started in 1957. They did he was commissioned to do work for the B volume, and the article, of course, is birds, but they're mainly water birds. And if you want to take a look at this, it's very interesting. Oh, thank you. And then here's the calendar that I mentioned. And then the reason I wanted you to see the brown thrasher is because some of you, I'm sure in the 5th or the 6th grade, you had to write and do a state project and that kind of thing. And the Secretary of State would always send you a pamphlet. And the example they used was the brown thrasher that Menaboni had done. The first year of Sports Illustrated, he actually did 2 covers for them. And this one's interesting because it's a fold out of various game birds. So that was a nice project that he was able to do. For the American Camellia Society, that's another story unto its own. But he painted 120 different camellia blooms. This one's been cut, so this isn't the size. And it was sort of like Book of the Month Club or Record of the Month Club. And you would get the nomenclatures stacked this thick for 5 years, and then you would get 20 of these. And what's interesting is they were all hand painted by students at UGA, because back in this time, color printing was so expensive, it was cheaper to hire students. So sometimes I've done for garden clubs and the American Camellia Society, I did a presentation just on these, and it's really interesting to see the different, if you have 3 copies of this particular one, there's just a slight shade difference, or, the student might, they're all different because they're all uniquely done. And Emory University did an exhibit on signatures, and they included Athos's because I think it's so beautiful and unique. And they had Walt Disney and some others that have a lot of flair. Well, thank y'all so much for the opportunity. I'm very grateful.
Yes, thank you, Russ.
My pleasure.